It's the Dev Friday Show with Mark and Tim.
Well, it's a little late today. Oh, and they switched us again. Look at that. So a little late. I had a meeting run long, and I got here late. So what are we, 12 minutes behind. Mark got back in the zone. So now he has absolutely no idea what to do. He is Emacking away, if I'm not mistaken.
That's where I was, Tim. You pulled me out of my Emacs zone as I was getting back into, because I was trying to fill the time while you were finishing up with the meeting.
Are you uploading again? Because I feel like your video's a little blurry. Your audio's a little. Now the audio, for those of you who are watching live, the audio is always much better on the podcast. You should go to devfridayshow.com. And you should listen there. You only have to wait a week after the live show for us to do all of the fancy audio things we do to make it sound better. So it will obviously sound better there than it does here. But
I don't know. How's it now?
I don't know.
I got so many things. With Windows 11, it's another world you just get sucked into. You got all this stuff
11?
running behind the scenes and uploading.
Yes,
and I've also been playing with some different backups. Like I said, I was last week, or not last week because we missed a week, but the last time,
all the things.
Yeah, backing up all the things. I'm kind of working up my backup strategy because I've been dealing with some backup issues lately. So I went to Backblaze and got everything backed up there, and also primarily switched to.
You were saying backup so much, I would not be surprised if Backblaze is a sponsor now. Are they not?
Yeah, they should be, because they always they like to sponsor some podcast. I know you're a Backblaze user yourself. At some point, maybe they'll hear that.
I am.
Also switching over to Google Drive from Dropbox, just trying it out. So yeah, you know me, crazy stuff, Tim.
I use Google Drive and Dropbox. So.
Well, I use both, but you think what I've been doing is I'm trying to trim down the monthly subscriptions that you find that you have.
Got a lot of them, right?
Yeah, and it gets to be annoying. So I'm like, I ask myself, am I really using this service enough to pay $10 or $20 a month for, or whatever it is? Because at the end of the month or the end of the year, that the stuff does add up. So I don't know, just trying some different things, different strategies.
So that means you may be getting rid of Dropbox. Is that what I hear?
No, I still keep it. Like, I still use Dropbox. Like I said, we use Dropbox for the show to sync our files that we record. I also use Dropbox for my notebook, for my org files for my Emacs, because it has a great sync on the org Zilli app. So I still use it for that. But the one thing I realized with Dropbox, that I wasn't using as much to collaborate with other people, because that's really its core feature.
Is it?
I think so. It's especially because I was doing some comparison of the kind of online syncing backup apps, after getting online with Backblaze and backing up my pretty much my whole computer, and then kind of comparing, contrasting the backup services I'm using, and kind of seeing how I use Dropbox, and thinking what Dropbox does. It does a really good job of syncing between different computers, and also between different people. So if you're collaboratively working with somebody else, I think it does a pretty good job. And I find that, other than you, Tim, lately I haven't been working with too many other people that are using Dropbox specifically. So
now, I don't use it for much collaboration, honestly, with other people. There's the files that we share. But for me, it's that I can have it on every computer and every device, and on my phone. And if I need a file, I can find it on my phone and download it quick. Which, for those who, like me, have the Synologies, yeah, you can do similar things with the DS File and some of the applications that you can run on the Synology. So maybe, I don't know, maybe there's a better, or let's just say a different way where I could leverage a service that I don't have to pay monthly for. All that said, Dropbox makes it so ridiculously simple.
It is, and I still like it. Like I said, I still have I think I'm up to like a free 8 GB account, so I kind of like that. Just trying that out and seeing how that goes. Because like I said, I moved all my files I was on Dropbox over to Google Drive, because I was paying, whatever. What is that?
Yeah, I saw it, because all like the LV Tech files that nobody's looked at for years have been moved.
So, well, I haven't backed up in case you need them. So I do have them backed up.
I might. I think they're also still on my Dropbox, because I don't exactly know how that works, but I have noticed Dropbox telling me different things are changing. So
yeah, that's been something I've been kind of playing with, and kind of seeing what works. I don't know. We'll see. Because one big thing I did was I moved all my files, my photos, those my image files from iCloud to Google Photos, because once I was since I did the move from going from the iPhone to Android about a couple years ago, and I've primarily just been using my Android. I still have my iPhone I use occasionally just for, because my family's on iOS, and so to kind of keep in sync with them, and just to have as another phone as a backup. And if I wanted to test anything on iOS, I can. But I only just use my Android phone for everything, and just using Google Photos to back up the photos or to store or to reference the photos I'm taking off of that phone. So I realized, like, why do I still have my whole library on iPhoto, which I never really check? And also on the Windows, I don't really have a great way to sync besides using their their website, because they don't have a great desktop app for Windows.
Really?
So
iPhotos doesn't have a good Windows app?
Even though economically it's not that expensive, like I was only paying like $5 a month or $10 a month. It wasn't that expensive for the amount of photos I had, but they did have this nice feature, which Google worked with them on, is to migrate all of your photos behind the scenes from iPhoto to Google Photos. And it took about a week, but it did it.
Really?
Yeah.
It's just like a slow transfer.
So it was about, I don't know, like 300 gigabytes or something like that. I don't know. Like the videos went over first, because I think there were a fewer of those, and then all the photos went over within about a week. And I got notified by Apple saying, okay, all your photos have been migrated over. I checked it, looked pretty good for me. Also, just looking at my Google Cloud and how that the file size increased in photos. But I really like the idea of moving over to Google Photos, even though, like I said, I go back and forth between privacy and giving Google all my information, and I do get a little bit worried about that. But I am kind of interested in the APIs, because
you really shouldn't worry about that, because they have said they're not going to be evil.
I know, you just trust them, trust your life away to them. But the other reason why I wanted to move it off too, because I was like looking at the APIs that iPhoto provides, and are really none. Don't really have any good developer APIs, unless you're going to be making like an iOS app and you want to try to integrate with the user's iOS library, like on the device. But really, from a web service perspective, they don't really offer much. And I was kind of thinking, if I ever want to do a project, because I actually think it would be kind of interesting. I'm not going to do it right now, but I just thinking about how I could apply machine learning or come up with some interesting projects, and how to apply some own machine learning to my own photos. That could be something interesting, which I could do with having my photos on Google, because they give you the APIs. I could access
Google's
that.
applying the machine learning for you.
That's true. I don't know how they're doing it, but they are doing it. So I don't know. That's something I was just.
Have you found that useful, to click on a person's face and just find all their photos in your library?
Yeah. Well,
it misidentifies a couple of my kids. Like, it thinks a couple of my kids are like twins.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's because it can't figure out. I don't know if the photos don't have the date on it, because it definitely seems to be figuring that out.
Yeah,
that faces change over time.
Mm-hmm. So I know that's just been a little bit aside. Having a lot of uploads coming from my local computer, but good thing I pay for unlimited internet, so I don't have any bandwidth caps on my
from
my internet,
Service Electric.
Yeah, for Service Electric. Yeah,
the oldest cable company in the United States.
So Tim, we weren't able to meet last week because
I heard you were floored.
I was flooring.
Flooring.
Oh,
yeah. Okay. I thought you.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
And for me, I don't do that many home improvement projects, and throughout the year. And there's one project that came up because my wife and my daughter volunteer at a cat shelter, a no-kill cat shelter where the cats go that are going to be that are on death's row or whatever they called, and they're going to be euthanized, and they get sent to this shelter for.
I don't know that they have a term for that.
I was trying to think, what is that? And so they get sent to this animal shelter to be adopted. So they've been volunteering at this organization for about a couple of years now, and they had their first floor, which they have this house that's been converted into an animal shelter, and the second floor is pretty much, I think, is all kind of wood floor, so that's fine. But the first floor is still, they have a couple of rooms that have carpet in them, and then that was just kind of getting kind of crazy. So they finally pulled the trigger, did a fundraiser, and they got some flooring in from Costco, but they need somebody to install it. And fortunately, my father-in-law is very handy, and he's built a house before, and he knows what he's doing, even though he's getting up there in age, but he's still pretty smart and pretty handy. So him and I went through there and we did the room. And for me, I thought, like I said, I don't do that many home improvement projects. I didn't know how long it would take. I thought, well, if we start early in the morning, take about 2 to 3 hours at max, and we could be in it because it's not that big of a room.
Right.
And yeah, so about 11 o'clock, 11:30, I was like, I don't know if we're going to make it. only having about like a quarter of the room done. But
So
and
I
then
thought
finally,
this was your own house, but you were flooring at somebody else's house.
yeah, well, that's why I said on Twitter it's community service. So I was like, I had to give up our show for community service, and like I said, it was
Oh,
voluntary.
that's right, and that's why we got the our show is community service
Yeah.
responses. That's what we got.
So
Helping people.
so
with
that was
this broadcast.
even though
every
we
week.
weren't able to meet last Friday, it was still a good day. But after the fact,
I want to know
was-
though, did they
I was
trust you
sore.
with the chop saw? Like what was your
Oh.
role in the floor laying?
My role was just brute force labor. So
Was that it? Just
like
carry these
my father-in-law, my father-in-law would do the cuts. He would primarily do the measuring. He would do the cutting, and then I would just be bending down on my hands and knees and putting the
So is this
the
like
planks
the
together.
the lock flooring?
Yeah, the interlock, like those luxury vinyl planks.
Oh, okay.
With
Gotcha.
the locking rubber mechanisms.
So you'd interlock them and then kind of have to tap them in so they lock
Yeah.
up with the one next to
Yeah,
them.
yeah. Which probably about what 80-90% of it went pretty well. There is that 10 or 20% that's the pain in the butt where it won't lock in, and you have to really jimmy it with some shivs or some pry bars to get it to work. And
I
so
think usually they're called shims. I believe the shivs are what you have when you're on death row, if I'm not mistaken.
like I said, Tim, I'm out of my domain when I'm working
Apparently.
around the house. So
Apparently.
so that's where I was, and then yeah. But I'm glad we could kind of get back together, Chat, 'cause I missed you.
Did you? Was
Yeah.
it that hard to go a week?
Yeah.
A week
Well,
without
I
talking?
did feel the week went longer.
Oh, okay. Well, look at
Because
that.
that's the one night, the one thing about doing the show each week and kind of having the week kind of, that comes at the end of the week, it does for some reason makes the week go by fast. And, because you kind of keep it in the back of your mind that to kind of pay attention to what you're working on and think about things you might want to talk about with you at the end of the week. So yeah, it went a little bit slower because I didn't have that to go
I was gonna
with.
say, you're missing a week of therapy. How are you feeling?
That's
Mark?
true. I
How are
know
you
it was pretty rough. It meant mentally I'm a little bit off, but then fortunately the end of the semester is only in a few weeks here, so that's nice. So
All right. Yeah. So almost. Oh, and then the job search starts in force. Is that right? Am I understanding that
I
correctly?
love how you always bring this up. I just had a faculty meeting like yesterday, and kind of meeting with a bunch of faculty and thinking like, well, it's like I didn't have to talk with Tim last week about like possibly looking for the job, so I could actually not have to feel like I have to like hide my head around people that
just
might be
gotta-
listening to this.
All heads down when you go into the
Yeah.
faculty meeting. Maybe nobody will notice me. I'm
Yeah.
just over here.
So
All
we'll
right.
see how. Well, we'll see. Well, yeah, we'll see how that goes. Like in May and June, yeah, we'll see how the what opportunities present themselves.
All right. So how is the C++ going?
C plus. I ended up on structures. I got busy with school and grading and haven't been able to get past that. But
Was that where you were before? I feel
think
like
it was
you were starting on
back where we
pointers or
talked.
something.
Now pointers I finished. Like I said, pointers was when I went through at Educative, that online course and
Right.
for C++. Yeah, pointers was interesting, which I was kind of a little bit. It was both looking forward to it and also a little bit nervous about because I didn't know how long it would take me to get through. It's like, okay, what kind of type of programming problems are going to kind of throw at me with learning about pointers. But then it was interesting learning about pointers. Really like, wow, I did learn all this stuff back in college. Just that I haven't had a real good chance to really apply these kind of basic concepts around kind of pointers and referencing, a little bit of memory management. But then it actually kind of all came back to me. And then the problems were too difficult. But then learning about it also gets you thinking about when you're using like arrays and variables and just referencing or or even just doing something simple like setting arguments to functions, and then used to doing that within a dynamic language that pretty much handles all of the memory management for you. Then it kind of gives you a different perspective, relearning pointers and kind of seeing how that works. And then also can kind of give you some kind of interesting tricks how you can, instead of redeclaring variables and creating pointers and then just changing values at the memory locations and doing little tricks like that, I could kind of see the use for especially for lower level applications.
But then you got stuck on structures, or got stuck.
Well,
like
just because because school got busy with grading. Because the end of the semesters, the one downside by the end of the semester, Tim, I do have to grade work, so I was kind of putting some of that off. So I had to get some student work graded in all my courses. So
I saw a headline. I think it was a Medium article, which they keep bubbling up these articles that they only want me to be able to read 3 of a month. I guess because if I read more than 3 of it, I'll be too smart, and they want to make sure I don't get too smart or something
Or
like
well,
that.
are you
They're like,
paying for
no, I'm not
the
paying
medium
for it.
premium?
No,
Yeah,
I'm definitely
because
not
I know
paying
they
for
want you
it.
to do that, which I get
Oh, is that
irritated
what
about
it
that.
is?
If I find like if I'm trying to look up something or research something and a medium article is I
And
go
it's
to
like
it,
the
I can
starred
read that.
one where you can only read
Yeah,
3
I
of them
can
a
read. I
month.
read the article. I like that, and then okay, then I start to maybe I'd look at the author and see what other articles. I start reading his other stuff. Then they start making me asking me for pay for it.
Right,
I'm like, oh my
right.
gosh, what is this?
You just create another Medium account. That's what you do.
Just jump between them.
I'm sorry. Is that not what you're supposed to do? Do I?
Wait, what were you saying? You were I
That's
interrupted you.
actually too much effort for me even to do that. Like the effort it takes for me to subscribe to yours, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
But I'm definitely not having the effort to create
Yeah.
another account just
Wait,
to read stuff.
but what were you saying? I'm sorry, I interrupted
Well,
you.
I can't read the articles, right? I
Yeah.
don't read the articles because I'm only allowed 3 a month.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid that I'll read it and then I won't be able to read a better one. So instead of reading the articles, I just read the headlines.
Yep.
And the headline,
Yeah.
I believe it was a Medium article. If not, maybe it was a headline from a different publication that I also did not click through to read. But it said something. It was some professor saying, I stopped grading my students' work, and I wish I would have done that years ago. Now, I have no idea if it worked, if it didn't work, what exactly the point is. I have a feeling that what he's trying to drive at is just doing the work is the educative process. Grading doesn't impact the student much. I'm not sure what he's saying. Maybe he thinks grades are just arbitrary and that you shouldn't have to have them. I don't know, but I feel like maybe you should adopt that philosophy.
It's possible, but you know, the one thing that I do believe that the college does provide is some level of assessment and verification of whatever qualifications that the student's going to get coming out of the program. Because like we talked about, you know, is it really worth it to go to college, especially how the price of college nowadays, and then how much information is free, and you could just if you can learn on your own, there's so many resources that, or even just cheap resources. Like I've talked about Educative, which I've just been amazed of. If you are the type of learner who likes to learn by, you know, written tutorials and or interactive, you know, features with tutorials, it's a great platform to use. But then there's so many video training, you know, platforms that also exist too that are not that expensive. So do you really need to go to college to get this education? No, you don't. But the nice thing that college provides, I think, is a couple things. It does provide a good community. So if you can get connected with either friends that are in the same program or even faculty who engage and like to kind of help and mentor you along, that's a good value. But I do feel the one thing that the faculty can give is good assessment. So if you don't do the grading, if you don't give feedback to students, the fact that, you know, whether or not they're doing well in the course, or
And how can they assess their own
how can
progress,
they, yeah,
right?
and also from a accreditation standpoint too for our program, because our program is a 2-year program. We're meant to have a reputation of our students coming out of the program where they could get hired, you know, in an entry level position as a web designer, web developer, or, you know, graphics designer, whatever, you know, whatever role they're going to be kind of going into, that they would have some type of validation, you know, not, you know, they have this degree. Well, what does a degree mean? Well, they should mean something, right? And if you don't have grades, then how can you really verify that?
Gotcha. No. I guess I can't learn everything from headlines, Mark.
But I could totally understand the desire not to grade that, because like I said, it's I usually want my pattern
you get that
probably
desire, huh?
like a quarter of the way. I keep my grades updated probably up to like the halfway point, like the midterm point of the semester, like where right before, like kind of before spring break or fall break, we just have that. My grades are usually updated. I usually update them week by week. And then because of spring break or just the transition of that going into the second half of the semester, there's a few weeks I start to lag and stuff, great, and that starts to catch up, especially when you teach like 4 or 5 or 6 courses. That starts to add up. So then I want to make sure I get all my grades updated before, let's say, the last 3 to 4 weeks of the semester, because I do allow the students to resubmit work and to improve their grade, and, you know, whatever way they can. So I want to make sure that they know that there are issues with certain exercises or projects that they might want to make note of and might want to correct before the end of the semester. I want to be able to give them that opportunity.
I will say, based on some things I've heard of other professors, nobody that I'm not talking about anybody that I know specifically, but just like what you hear people say, you sound like a very good professor.
Oh, really?
Like allowing students to submit more work to get your grades up, things like that. I've heard plenty of stories from other college students of like, no, the professor wouldn't even work with me on that. They're like, oh, you missed a class because you had like necessary surgery? Tough. You can't.
Well,
You can only learn when
yeah.
I'm talking in real time. There's no video. I don't do that stuff. I don't. Yeah.
Well, there are certain types of classes, like if it's a performance based, where let's say my wife teaches communication. So if she teaches a public communication course and the student doesn't show up to do the speech, they can't really just
Right.
make that up in a way. She it's very different. She's kind of a hard line where like they'll have makeup dates. So that if you can't make this one date, here are your other option for making that up. But that's pretty much the limitation of that. But yeah, I totally agree. Where like when in the past I wouldn't accept late work, at least for the exercises. I would have like a hard, like, because I do weekly exercise where they have to submit by the end of the week, and then I would just do like a hard deadline after that. And then the projects I would allow them to resubmit or submit late with a deduction, but I would would allow that. But I found too is like, just the students are paying for this, and I know the students run into situations during the semester where they may get behind, whether or not because of family or personal reasons, and just the content of the course. And I do feel that because I am going, because I went to grad school and I went to college, and I did find myself getting behind one semester, but I was able to get caught up by the end. So I want to give that opportunity to a student who feels like if they get behind and they get behind a couple of projects, I don't want to just cut them off. If they can get the work in by the end of the semester, that's all I care about.
Yeah, I'd say again, this is not something that I have a lot of experience with, but the feel that I get is honestly community colleges
Yeah.
have more of that good relationship between hey, we're partners together in this. You're paying for this. I want to make it easy.
Yeah.
Than say more university style. Just my observation from the outside, but
Yeah.
no. The one thing I can definitely identify with is that assessment side of things, because I once upon a time, doesn't really mean much now, but I was Zen certified engineer, whatever that means.
Ooh.
It means, well, this was
That
years
is
ago.
one thing that I've not been able to do in my life. I've had many life
Really?
goals, Tim.
Wait,
Going
your goal was to become a Zen certified engineer? If so,
Well-
I would set it a little higher.
well, goals like going to Japan. That was one goal. I accomplished that.
Okay.
Getting a grad degree. That was actually a goal I did have, and I didn't really have a reason to it until I got a teaching job where I was forced to get it. And
You're so good, you're hitting goals you didn't even set.
it was one of those goals where like I would think, okay, yeah, it'd be actually nice. Because my dad had my dad went to seminary. He had the masters of MED or something like that. No,
Masters of Divinity? Yeah.
Yeah. So you got that. So I was like, why can't I do the same thing my dad did? But I don't want to become a minister, but I would. I had that on my list, and then it eventually became a reality because I was forced to keep my job. But the kind of thinking about one goal I never did, I always thought about doing, was getting certified. Because back when I was in the Microsoft world, the certification,
like your
was
MCSE
huge.
or something like that, right?
Yeah, and I was like, there was times where I was like, yeah, I got a book, I start studying. It's like, okay, yeah, let me learn this. Give me about a month or 2 months, and
I forget what was the Cisco one?
I didn't know. I didn't do anything. I was just doing the MCE and the different levels of like certified professional developer or something like that. Like back in the .NET world, I was super into that, and I was going to do that, but I never did. So I am a little jealous that you are Zen certified. You actually have a professional certification you could add to your resume. Show that off.
And oh wow, and then, we just opened a can of worms there. Now we haven't talked about the story, and I don't think we'll talk about the story today. But we've teased about it a couple times. The time I interviewed myself. And yes, you can definitely put Zen certified engineer on your resume, whether you are one or not. You can put it on your resume, as I found out when I interviewed myself. But that's a different story for a different time. But so having the ZCE, the Zen certified engineer, it doesn't mean much. I don't think it really ever got me an extra job or anything like that. Even as a contractor, I don't know how much it helped to have that little badge. And I say even as a contractor, I'm still a contractor. Even as a starting contractor, where I'm working for a bunch of different clients, doing a lot of little jobs here, little jobs there, trying to get myself established, without much of a reputation, I don't know if it even helped then. But the value for me was, and I got this, I want to say 13 years ago, maybe something like that. It was right after I got married. The value for me was I was out there saying I'm a web developer. I'm a PHP web developer. But I wanted to validate it myself. That like I could have the confidence to say, no. Not only do I think I'm a decent PHP developer, that I understand the language, and I can say to somebody, yes, I'm a PHP developer, and I have experience and I understand how to write PHP code. But it was for me something to give me confidence and understanding that, I actually was, because I was self-taught, right? I started my first PHP job at a web hosting company the day after I read the PHP manual. I just read it because I knew I was going to be doing PHP work.
How early in your career did you get the certification?
Well, that's a good question.
Like, did you do it before you got a lot of client work?
It was
Or did
kind
you
of in
do-
the midst of it. And like I say, it really, I really kind of tag it in my mind to right after getting married. I don't know how close it was to getting married, but because at that point, then it goes from, hey, I'm a contractor trying to make money, by myself, versus, okay, now there's a family. Now I have a wife. Let's hope this contractor thing is legit and I can actually, make a livelihood out of it, because I've got people now that depend on me more than just me.
So
So I
you
think
did
there's
it.
a little bit of that.
You did it earlier on in your. I'm just saying you did
Oh,
it
yeah.
either earlier on in your career as a way to kind of for yourself, like you said, verify for yourself, to assess your skills or your knowledge, so that you could feel more comfortable going out and looking for more clients or larger projects. Or
Yeah.
is that part of it?
And at that point, I had to have been doing the contracting kind of full time for at least 2-3 years, right? I'd already been doing that, but I'm now falling into my groove of getting work when I used to work heavily through Odesk, right? Falling into that groove of getting work, and it was just a way to validate that, hey, the claims that I'm making, I'm a PHP developer, were actually valid, because I'm not just a PHP developer, but the company who kind of manages the engine. I know it's an open source project, and trying to understand all those relationships is different. But the company that's core to building the core of PHP, their certification I passed. And it was, I mean, it's go to a testing center. They put you in a computer in a room with nothing around you. You don't have any. Maybe
It's
a
fun
piece of
time.
paper and pencil. Ask a bunch. Yeah, isn't it? But no, that was important to me. Would I do it again right now? No, I wouldn't see any value
Yeah.
to me trying to get a different certification now. Honestly, maybe I'm wrong. But
Well,
I don't have the
that's
motivation there.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you about. Since you are looking at applications and resumes for prospective hires, then do you still see people are listing those? Like, is it still something that's people are actively doing? Because I don't know that. Like, I haven't talked to anybody, or I haven't even thought about it for myself in a while too.
That's a
So
good question. The role that I play as part of that hiring process, when I'm involved with that, is past that point.
okay,
Right? Past that point, the resume has already been vetted, and someone's being, kind of handed to me and say, okay, this is a senior developer or this is a junior developer. I will look over the resume, but I'm not looking for those type of things. I'm looking for other keywords to kind of indicate to me where they're at in their career, and then I just have a conversation with them. And it's similar to we did one on the show, right? Like I ask questions about technology, specifically programming technology and concepts, but I want to see that they're able to talk about it. And I also want to see when there's something that they're not able to talk about, or I throw out a terminology that they don't understand, that they're not flustered by it. Whereas, like, oh no, because they have the confidence to be, hey, maybe I've never thought about that before, talked about that before. Could you just explain it to me? Like, give me the high level of what
yeah,
you're talking about? Or I'll explain this concept or what I mean by this concept. And then they'll identify it. They'll be like, oh, yeah, yeah. They might not call it that, but they understand it, right? So,
yeah.
but yeah, I'm not at the point where I'm trying to look through and filter resumes.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't. It's interesting. That's something that I remember back in the day. That was a big thing. And I think there was also a time around. Was it the? Oh, am I what late 20 before 2010? I don't know. There was like a good like 5 to 10 years where like certifications were like the hot thing. It was kind of before like Web 2.0, maybe.
I don't know, but
Maybe
I remember. I
back
remember
when
when I was
Java
younger.
is back when like .NET, Java, they were competing back and forth, and and developers would usually get certified. Like either get certified in the Sun world, you get certified in the Microsoft world. Then they had the Oracle, and I was just thinking about it from the programming standpoint. I think from an IT perspective, that's an interesting thing too. From an IT perspective, especially because you could become an IT professional without having too much education. Do you feel like maybe the certifications are a little bit more valued in that area?
Well, that's where I remember seeing them all the time, right? The
Yeah,
MCSE, the Microsoft Certified Systems Engineer, I think, and the CCE, which I think was the Cisco Certified Engineer, and all those things around
yeah,
hardware and
yeah,
networking. That was
yeah.
where it was at.
Because the faculty I talk, well, I haven't talked to them this semester because we've pretty much been remote. But when I was on campus a lot, I would frequently meet with the computer science faculty who are mostly focused on security and networking. And the certification is such a huge part of their program, where they would get a lot of money in for coming into the program to making sure their curriculum was updated so that people could go through the program and then almost immediately get certified. They could just go take the test and get certified. And that was kind of, so their program was kind of a dual program where they could come out with a degree, but also be able to get certified very, very easily. And that was a core focus for like networking and security.
Right, because the certification meant so much for being hired in those industries.
Yeah. Yeah. So
yeah, I totally get the value of that grade. That feedback tells you that, hey, this is something that I actually know. And I don't know why. I say the podcast is going to sound better. It's not going to sound better with the vacuuming, probably. But
you keep unmuting yourself. I know.
Yeah, I know. You're just going in and out. It's like, and then we started late. So is your Roomba going to kick off in a little
4
bit?
o'clock. 4 o'clock. So we're scheduled.
Yeah. My Roomba, which is most likely a child with a vacuum cleaner, kicked off early downstairs. But you also mentioned, or unless you have other things.
Well, you were talking about the room, like all these things like I wanted to talk to you about, Tim, they're just popping in my head.
Right.
I saw a video today pop up on my feed, what I was usually do on the YouTube, and I kind of check out in the morning.
You mean when you watch our show from 2 weeks ago, so you can see yourself in HD?
No, just check out, like, usually my news sources from, checking out, whatever. I don't want to get into the YouTube rabbit hole, because actually I was trimming some of my YouTube the subscriptions, because I feel like with the YouTube algorithm, it gets kind of crazy. The more people you follow and the more diverse channels you follow, you get some really crazy recommendations, and then you just I don't know, it's kind of bad. But anyway, I saw this video pop up.
That's what happens when you follow Joe Rogan there, Mark. That's what happens.
Well, he's not on YouTube anymore. He's on Spotify, which I do. I do subscribe to Spotify.
I don't even pay attention.
No, I do subscribe to Spotify, and I do. I'm not I don't listen to every episode. I kind of I watch his feed, and if he has something interesting on that he talks to, then I'll listen to it. But anyway, like I said, just like our show's a constant rat hole. We just like get distracted in what we talk about things. But one thing that popped up was the iRobot, the iRobot robot that's not a vacuum cleaner. Have you seen this?
The what? There it goes again. I must have found a new battery.
What is it? It's iRobot, right? The company.
iRobot was the movie.
No, not movie. Oh my gosh!
You mean the Roomba?
The Roomba. Yeah, but what's the company that makes that?
I don't know.
I think it's like iRobot.
Just ask Google. Google should be able to tell you.
I'm talking to you right now, Tim. I can't multitask. I'm trying to stay focused here. So I saw a YouTube video about the Roomba. They have a version of the Roomba. It looks just like a Roomba, but without the vacuum cleaner. And it's an open platform.
Oh, you're right. It's iRobot. Yeah, iRobot.
It's an open platform that you could program. So you could get this basically a Roomba that's not a vacuum cleaner, that is a robot, and then you could learn how it learns, because like I said, it's been fascinating too watching this. It's not a Roomba.
So this is from iRobot?
Yeah, I just saw it. And it's an open platform where you could program. It has a lot of tools. You could see how it analyzes the environment and does like 3D scans, and then you could program it to do certain functions. So I thought that's pretty cool, because the other thing I've been getting into a little bit over the past week, I picked up like a Raspberry Pi, the computer in the box and the kit. So I've been...
The iRobot Create 2 programmable robot. Is that what you're telling me about?
Yeah. It looks like a Roomba.
This? It does look like a Roomba.
Yeah, it has a charging base, everything. Yeah, it's just like a Roomba without a vacuum cleaner.
And it also says clean right on the top. So I feel like it's a Roomba. I feel like someone said, let's make a Roomba, but make people program it.
Well, but it doesn't have the vacuum cleaner components of it. It's basically just that part's not in there, but it's basically the exact same device with the exact same hardware, except for the vacuum cleaner parts of it.
It doesn't, because it says clean right on the top.
I don't like. Okay,
it says right there.
I don't know. I gotta have to look it up, and I'm afraid to look it up right now, because I was following.
You don't have enough internet access.
No. Because I'm just afraid to get distracted and not be able to get back into this conversation here. But I was following the Adafruit channel, because this is where it popped up on. The Adafruit.
I'm familiar. I've bought plenty of stuff from them before.
Arduinos and because the other thing I got this week or last week, it was actually because I wanted to talk to you about last week, was I picked up I think it was my first Raspberry Pi.
You actually got one?
I got one because there was I was using an old MacBook Pro. An old MacBook Pro that's probably about over 10 years old, to print out my Dymo labels that I use for shipping. Because I do a little bit of eBaying here and there, and I have like a label printer that works really nice.
All right, we cannot just let that go. What do you eBay?
Well, okay, you see all these figures behind me?
Is that what it is? Okay.
No, these were paid for by either selling or reselling collectibles. So it's kind of a little bit of a side hobby of mine. So Rich,
So
I'll
you
find stuff I can
buy
resell. And like,
collectibles
yeah,
and then you sell them on
yeah,
eBay for a
yeah, yeah,
profit?
yeah,
Like where do
yeah.
you buy, where do you find them? Like at local flea markets and
Oh yeah, I
stuff? Or
would.
do you
Yeah, back in the day, I was doing that. I was also like going to like whole like closeouts of like stores and like kind of seeing stuff. That's about a couple of years ago I started this. I tailed it back. I don't do it that much anymore, but I still have some remnants here and there. I still need to kind of move and sell. So, but I was shipping a lot. I was selling a lot just because it was just a kind of a small, kind of fun hobby side business I was doing. So, wasn't really making much money, but the money I was using, I could kind of play with. So it was a nice kind of side thing.
So
But
you have
anyway,
a Dymo label printer that you have
yes.
hooked up to an old
I was hooked up
computer.
to an old
Yeah, yeah.
MacBook Pro, and the
All
only
right.
purpose of this MacBook Pro that was old, and it was so old where I had to keep it constantly plugged in because it would never hold a charge because it was just an old notebook. And I was like, I was realizing, wouldn't it actually be nice if I just had like a dedicated computer, but I didn't want to spend much on like a dedicated computer just for this. And then I was like looking around. I can remember that I saw this Raspberry Pi 400 with the computer in the box. The keyboard that's built in the keyboard. Did you ever see this one?
The
It's like
Pi 400.
the Pi 400, yeah, that's
Yeah.
built into the keyboard.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was only like $100. And I was like, oh, it's like, okay. It'd be kind of interesting to kind of have. I was talking about it'd be nice to kind of have like a work computer or just a project computer that's Linux based and that I could just kind of play with and kind of do some stuff with. And I never really did anything really functional with a Raspberry Pi before. And I was like, okay, let me just try it out. I got it from the Raz or PiShop.us, which is which is in Delaware, which is super fast shipping. Only got here in a couple days. And got it working. Because one thing I saw that Dymo have Linux drivers for the label printer. And so that was the other thing. Okay, so if I have Linux drivers for that and it works with it, and I was able to do it. Yeah, I was able to look up Dymo labels on their little applications.
So you just hooked up the Pi 400 to your printer and I guess to a mouse and a screen. So
it comes
you have a keyboard, right? Or does the keyboard have a trackpad?
No, I wish it was a trackpad. That was the one thing that would be a nice feature to it. I wish I actually had a trackpad built into the keyboard, so I wouldn't have to have a mouse separated based on how I use it. But it has it, the computer is built into the keyboard, has all of the plugs on the back of it. It comes with a mouse, kind of a cheap mouse, but it's functional. Plug it into a monitor, plug in the Dymo into it. The driver's installed flawlessly, and it works out of the box. So it's kind of an interesting kind of a playing with that and kind of just having just a kind of a fun kind of project test computer I could kind of just play with here and there to kind of do some stuff with that. That is Raspberry Pi, which is super impressive how well that's got. Because I remember playing that back in the Lehigh Valley Tech days when we would do like the Arduinos, we do in the I think in the hackathons, people would kind of either do like an Arduino or Raspberry Pis. Yeah. So kind of seeing some. I think you even made like a door opener. Or doorbell? What did you make with your daughter?
We had to unlock the door.
Was it with an Arduino?
No, it was with an Arduino, yeah. So it wasn't a full-on computer. It was a microcontroller. Yeah. But yeah, the issue was the door for this venue was down 2 flights of stairs or more. It was a huge amount of stairs. Remember that? Mm-hmm. And then to unlock it, all you'd have to do is ground a pad by touching it with your finger. And we wanted to unlock it from upstairs, so I forget even what we did. I think we built something that had it was like a wire that went down to the ground, and then a servo that would just touch it. So we could execute a command from upstairs, or even I don't know, press a button.
I think you did it with a text message, didn't you? Was it?
Probably because back then I was Nexmo. So
yeah. I think that's what you did with it.
Probably used the text message to do that. Yep. And I did that with my oldest, who at the time was I think 6.
Yeah.
So,
but just playing with this computer just made me think about your kids and my kids too. I'm like, I wish back in the day when my first computer was like a Tandy 1000 or Tandy 2000. Like it was a very similar setup where it was like a computer was built in with a keyboard in one unit.
Right. Mine was the Apple IIc Plus, which was basically
to mimic the Apple II. It came after that, and it was interesting, kind of thinking back how like all the components were inside of it. It was a good size where I could still put like some I/O cards, like a sound card. I remember replacing in it. Maybe a modem. I definitely replaced a couple times in that thing. But it was that type of computer. That was a great computer to have as like a kind of a first computer to kind of tinker around with. But then thinking about how now that you have this very small keyboard and you have the Raspberry Pi, which has gotten to be pretty powerful as for what you can do with it. And if your kids to have this type of stuff nowadays, and like if you're into tinkering and playing not with the program but also with like the hardware, because I do like the Also the interface that has in the back of the keyboard where you can do like an IO port and kind of do an extension of that. So if I want to do any Arduino or Raspberry Pi projects to do like an extension to some type of other board, can kind of plug into it with an adapter cable. So
yeah, it's because the Raspberry Pis usually have what I want to say, the GPIO pins are on the top. You can put hardware attached boards on top, but you have to do it a different way with
so it has
the
like a cable that could come out to like a GPIO slot, and then you just kind of plug into a separate device. So
now I have for my kids, I've never like, there's so much that I wish I could leverage more and teach them more of this stuff, but at least get them familiar with these things. But we have 2 Pi tops right across the room from me, where the two of my kids, they've been passed down now, a couple siblings, right? And the Pi tops are a Raspberry Pi inside a laptop controller or a container, right? So it has a screen, it has a keyboard, it has everything, and the Raspberry Pi's there, and you can slide off this little bezel on top, and there's the Raspberry Pi. And there's there's a circuit board you can start playing with if you want to do actual Raspberry Pi like electronics programming. And I love that concept. I just haven't been able to leverage it as much as I would want. But the Raspberry Pis as a whole are great for that whole I wish I just had a computer here. I've loved the marriage between microcontrollers to control something and a Raspberry Pi just to sit on top of it and act as the web server to then take whatever your thing is and IoT it, right? Yeah. And there's other ways to do that, but it's super simple to have that self-contained. And especially if you look at the compute modules for Raspberry Pis, the compute modules are still a single, single chip computer, or something like that. I forget what the acronym is. But they're without all the peripherals or the ports or anything like that. And then you just have the board that it clips into. And you expose whatever you want, which in the case of, hey, if I just want to take something and take some microcontroller or some simple electronics device and then give it a web server, well, I don't have to expose anything, really, as long as it's got Wi-Fi. As long as I got Wi-Fi hardware, just plug in the compute module, and now you've got a full-on computer that's running side by side with whatever your device is. That full-on computer can be your web stack, your control stack, and then just use serial communication to change whatever you need on your device, on that more microcontroller type thing. So it's crazy what Raspberry Pi's opened up for just general people to do, because you can build those boards now. You can design the computer boards in computer boards. What am I even talking about? You can design the circuit boards and have them done low run. It's not cost prohibitive, right? It may not be like dirt cheap, but it's not cost prohibitive to build your own board that is compatible with the compute module. So whatever you want to do, make the board, plug the compute module in to get the full-on computer, whereas your board does whatever electronics type thing you want. And from a maker standpoint, tools like that are amazing. I love Adafruit. I love all the stuff, all the hardware that they make accessible and easy for people to play with. I've got a box of stuff waiting for me to actually get to it. Some solenoids for with garden hose threads, so I can better automate the irrigation for my garden. Because I just have a simple timer now. I'd rather be able to say, turn this zone on, turn that zone on, and have it controlled by either Arduino or a Raspberry Pi like thing, a small computer, than just a timer that I have currently, which only can control one zone. So there's so much you can do it. It's really cool where that technology has come.
Yeah,
of course, the chip shortage is sometimes hard to get a hold of them, which I was surprised that you got it.
That's true too, because that's what I think the reason why because I had this idea, and usually I kind of think about these things, even if it's $100, like I'll think about it for a couple of weeks, see if I get it. But I really too was like, they only had like a couple more in stock. It was like, is this gonna be another situations once they go out of stock, they're not gonna have these type of computers anymore for a while. So jumped on it. So that's kind of fun to play with. There's a bunch of people that build like little computers like that out of a Raspberry Pi and a little LCD panel, and it's kind of like a thing. I forget what, I think it's from some sci-fi thing or something. I forget what they call it, but I kind of like it because it's a nice, easy for me. It's like, I'm not as into the hardware as you are. So for me to, even though, like I said, as a kid, I was kind of took everything apart. But I come from more of a developer perspective. And so I'm like, okay, I could sit down and I could start to play with, whatever, an ID or kind of code some stuff in it, maybe, do it from the coding perspective. But it gives me opportunity that if I want to use the GPIO port and kind of plug in a separate, separate device or something to start to integrate something with, it gives me that opportunity. So,
and even if you don't want to go down the hardware route, it's still this thing where if you have a peripheral that you would, like your printer, right?
Mm-hmm.
You want it to be someplace, and let's say for some reason, let's take out the Dymo label printer and say that it's a receipt printer, which also you can get USB receipt printers, right? Say you wanted to put that someplace and you wanted it to spit out every order that came in.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you don't need a full computer.
Yeah.
You just need a headless Raspberry Pi with an internet connection. Make sure your software is running on it that says, oh, I will accept webhooks, or I'll pull something and I'll pull down new orders. And as soon as one comes in, boop, I print it out. And now you have something that, whatever your business is or need is, okay, we had a new customer order, it popped out. Say, for example, you were in the business of trying to communicate orders from online to restaurants.
I know.
I mean,
this is something that we did have conversations
fax
about.
it or anything.
Yes,
You could just boom, print it out right away. Because
Yeah,
your client would be nothing more than Raspberry Pi running your own stack, which is really, to me, like what it makes so accessible is this idea of if only I had a small device that you could easily power that was connected to the internet and could run my code. Like that's it. $30. You have it. Now plug in whatever you need for it to do, and sometimes that is just commercial off-the-shelf USB peripherals, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you've got it. You don't need your own special thing. It's there. It's a small computer ready for you just to program however you want. You need a wireless speaker? You can make a wireless speaker. Install some DLNA software on it so it can be, or UN Universal Plug and Play, UPnP. So it can be a source. Just run it there, plug it into your speaker through the audio out. Oh, you don't like the audio out of the Raspberry Pi because it's terrible? Fine. Get a better one. They have hardware that you can plug into the GPIO, and you have a better digital audio converter right there. Or plug in a USB sound card if you want it to be better. And then plug that into your speakers, and boom, you just created a wireless speaker system. I know they sell them, but if your purposes need that plus something else, you can just build it. And it being so accessible is great.
So the first project I'm thinking about doing with it, like I said, I haven't pulled the trigger on this because I'm still thinking about it, but once the summer comes, I may do it.
Your first project was a label printer.
Well, that's done. That was easy. It just worked out of the box. All right.
Yeah, okay.
Print my first labels. Loved it. But the first project I was looking at the camera module that it has for the Raspberry Pi.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting because it has like a couple small little mini lenses you could hook onto it and have like a telephoto lens. Because one thing I was doing when I sell stuff on eBay, because you have to take photos of the items you're selling, and as many, if you take as many photos as you can, it actually does better for your listings. And so one thing I always thought was a pain, even though I'm doing it with my phone, is taking different perspectives of the object that I'm trying to sell and having to take a picture, turn it, frame it, turn it, and then take about 12 photos. It takes a little bit of time and just whatever. So wouldn't it be kind of cool if I had like a camera that's just on a tripod, and then I could just set it to say, okay, start taking pictures. I don't have to automatically take a picture. It'll just look to see when the product's changed. So let's say if I have the product facing in one direction, it'll just take a picture. Then it'll detect if I move it. So basically it'll be constantly taking pictures in the background, but then comparing them to see when one has changed, like, from a percentage wise, and then to kind of save that. And I could have a program that gets kind of just see the pictures that were taken and then be able to select the ones I want to do. So
you're like really close to a 3D scanner.
Well, I also was thinking about it'd be kind of fun as like a stop motion camera too. For like if you're doing like a stop motion film with like action figures, which I've done in the past. Just for fun.
Do stop motion films with those action figures behind you?
It's
Mark?
not something I would ever produce and show to the world. Something when I've gotten bored in the past and kind of played with some stuff, but it was always the pain of doing it. Yeah, it was a process. Like what? Because actually, the posing and the setting up the scene, that actually was the fun part. It's the labor's part of like doing the camera part, setting that, framing that. But what if you could actually do it where like the camera part was almost automated, and was more of the creative process of just posing and setting up the environment. What do you want to do for the stop motion film? I don't know. That'd be something. It was just an idea,
but yeah, your first idea, like I said, is very similar to the 3D scanner. The only difference with the 3D scanner is you put something on what is essentially a turntable, and it turns it for you. So it's scanning the whole thing. So if you add that, you just add a turntable.
That'd be interesting. I wonder if there's this like 3D libraries you could access for the Raspberry Pi camera, or some libraries you could do. So if I get a picture, take a 3D scan of it, that would actually be better information to judge if something's changed perspective or not.
Well, I mean, it could, but what I'm just saying is in that context, you can just have, and honestly, you don't need to use the Raspberry Pi camera module for this. You could have the Raspberry Pi trigger the shutter of another camera, right? Like if you have a DSLR or something that is has a shutter that's triggerable. A lot of those either use IR or an electronic trigger, and that could be wired to the GPI just fine. And then you just have the Raspberry Pi orchestrate it, right? Say turn the turntable 45 degrees, take a picture. Turn the turntable 45 degrees, take a picture.
Yeah.
And then it's just like put it on and hit the button, and everything, as long as everything's white and your lights are right, and you have your photography camera set to the right exposure to capture whatever's the subject is. I think you just hit a button and you can take all the different angles you want.
Yeah. Well, I'm just curious, if just doing the analysis, image analysis always kind of fascinating too from a programming
There's a lot of
like,
computer learning stuff that they do on Raspberry, or not computer vision stuff that people use Raspberry Pis for in robotics.
So it's something I always thought about playing with, doing like just analyzing images. That's why I was thought about, talking about Google Photos and having all my photos on Google Photos. I have the APIs now. If I wanted to access my own library of photos, I could do that and then to do some learning on it. So it's something that, I don't know, might want to play with them.
Could be fun. So Raspberry Pis. What else was there last week that you didn't get to talk about?
Well, I don't know. We're gonna start running out of time. But one thing I was not banging my head about, but going back and forth in my own mind of when to use a framework and when not to use a framework. I was going to ask you about that.
That's an interesting question.
When does a component library or a set of libraries become a framework?
Wow.
And how do you define that?
We've got like 9 minutes left.
I know this is this is a big topic. I know, and I dropped the actual developer topic for this developer show.
Yeah, let's delve into some relatively philosophical in terms of computer programming.
Okay, let me just preference why you're thinking why that came as part, because I actually was integrating, doing some work with things. So go back to Site Build, the project I chip away at, and integrating the Grape.js editor into that. And traditionally, I would be using just React or Gatsby, and I was thinking I was going to do it with React, but kind of looking into how Grape.js is basically it is kind of its own JavaScript component library or a framework, however you want to consider it. And I was like, I could definitely do it with React. Other people have done it before, but I was like, what if I just want to do it a cleaner approach and not have to do it outside of React? What would I use? But I still kind of want to do it in a structured way of some level. So then I got into web components and started taking a look at web components, how that is basically a very light, more vanilla style JavaScript, but then it gives you sort of not really a pattern to use that you could then make these components that can interact directly with the API of the browser. And then I got it almost works. It's not very clean. It's not very presentable right now, but I did get it working, getting Grape.js working with a web component, built that. And then that started getting me thinking about, okay, because actually I actually like not having to rely on a framework dependencies. But that's where I get back to, like, I hate dependencies in a sense. I always go through those times of feeling like, I wish my application didn't depend to have all these dependencies that it could just break at any point if something gets upgraded or changed. And I have experienced that on both in the Ruby on Rails days and and also some Node or React Native. I've dealt with issues with that in the past. Then it got me thinking about, well, why, when you do adopt a framework, and even if you start with just using a set of components or set of libraries, that becomes a huge dependency. So when is that, when is the benefits there of using it? So that got me just thinking about going back and forth, like I said, kind of thinking about where I want to go, what I want to kind of focus on for my projects, and kind of, because I always go back to having like an anti-framework or anti-dependency standpoint, because it feels like you go down certain paths where you could lead yourself kind of too down or dependent upon the framework that you're using, and you put yourself into a box.
And that's so. But there's two different things there that it seems to be. You're talking on one hand about dependencies, and that doesn't matter whether it's a framework or a component library, and there it's just, well, we probably okay, I've heard people be very averse to bringing in dependencies, but the truth is, you're dependent on something, right? Or maybe you're dependent on the language, right? Languages can break.
Or maybe what I'm worried about, which you see this all the time with Node, is
Mhm.
dependencies don't even know about or even aware about. It's just because
Oh,
it's
okay.
all the libraries that you are not even aware that the one module you want to use because it provides some functionality, but depends upon 40, 40 other
Other things
libraries
that then
that
somebody changes
becomes like a
thing and they
dependency
break.
tree that could become an issue.
Yeah, I feel like that is a very JavaScripty place to
Mm.
be, honestly. It just feels that way from the issues that they've had in the past. I'm not saying other languages do a better job, but I think they do. I think
So,
they
so,
do in dependency management.
so the one
But
thing that I wanted to ask you was, what's your view of like from a frame? Because you have, we talked about Zen framework, you were
mhm.
certified in it. What's your
Well, that
perspective
wasn't
of
Zen
like,
framework actually. I wasn't
you,
certified Zen framework. That was just PHP. It was a certification
oh,
from
certification student,
Zen
yeah, because Zen
for
is
PHP.
Zen is the PHP company. That's why.
That is what they used to say.
So, but from your for projects, when do you feel like, okay, if you do you prefer just going through libraries or components or smaller pieces, or would you
So
be hesitant about going full
I was asked
framework?
this question yesterday as to why a bigger legacy application that I work on, we hadn't just adopted bringing in a framework versus what we are doing, which is putting in a lot of different component libraries. And I mean, we've only got 5 minutes left, so I think it's probably worth attacking the what makes it a framework. And that, because
Yeah,
that to me was a
yeah,
really interesting question,
yeah.
because there's plenty of things that are both component libraries and are also frameworks. You can use them as a framework, kind of, but they also can be exposed as just components that you use how you want. And in the context of this one legacy application, and I say legacy, it's not really like it's legacy sounds like, oh, it's old and broken, and no, it's not. It's actually just been around for a very
It
long time.
exists. Yeah,
Yeah, it has existed for. It's not
yeah.
a new program. It has been around for a very long time. It has gone through a bunch of iterations. And why didn't we just say we're going to get rid of our own homegrown framework and use this other framework because we like it? Just pick one and pick the best one. Instead, we're taking component libraries because then we can tune it very much to what we need it to be. And then we're borrowing component libraries. So we're saying we're going to use code that somebody else wrote that does its job just great. And we're going to be free to pick the components that we want from a variety of different libraries that fit best for our use case. And then the things that don't, or we might not have a good fit for, okay, we'll write that code our own. We'll write the
Mhm,
code that we need to our own. We'll own
mhm.
that. And we've done that. We've brought in like component libraries that do routing, and then we've added our layer on top of it to make it routing that works best for us.
Yeah,
Component libraries that bring in, how you request, how you handle request and response, and we've added our code on top of it to make it fit better for us, but still maintain compatibility, so we can interrupt with other component libraries just fine. So that pattern has worked really well there. The thing that struck me is you still have the dependency issue, just
mhm.
perhaps not as deep, because on a framework level, you're like, oh, I want to go from framework 1 to framework 2,
Yeah,
a major step. And now I find there's a lot of things that have changed, where it might be simpler to say I want to go from component version 1 to component version 2, and then I might be able to just focus on that component. Now, maybe that component has other dependencies that have to also change, and that makes upgrading that component more difficult. But
yeah.
I feel like upgrading a component will never be more difficult than upgrading a framework. Upgrading a framework will likely be more difficult than upgrading a single component every single time. So there's
Yes.
that. But you said what makes it a component library versus a framework. And I think, I don't know this is a good definition, but what comes to my mind is when it impacts how you write or structure your code. So if the dependency you're bringing in impacts how you structure or you write your code, and start saying things like, well, that should be in this directory, or that should be over here, or you need 3 of these, or you need to call it that, then
See,
you're using a framework.
because you're talking more of like an opinionated project or structure of how to structure your application.
Whether it's
I was
structure in
I
terms of
was
where
wondering,
classes are.
yeah, I was wondering, is it like a higher level dependency on other components within the framework? Like, so
Well,
like
if you're also
you cannot
proxying out
use
something to them, like saying
you
you're
cannot
going to
use
handle inbound requests.
the router unless you use
Hmm.
the, I don't know, I'm just thinking about whatever interpreter, whatever their, you know, whatever component would be. One component depends on another one. You can't use one or the other without the
Yeah.
other.
No, I would say that's the same thing, because that's impacting how you write your code.
Yeah.
Like, can I use this router without using that handler or that other thing? No, you can't. Well, then that's a framework, not a component. Or you're using it as a framework, not as a component.
Which I do agree with you. I think this is a kind of a Node thing because it bugs me to death when I have to like compile or build my React or Gatsby application, and I just get a stream of these warnings saying, this library, this is deprecated, you better be changing this. But it's not my library, it's not my component. But I depended on it somehow.
Yeah, and I think that's a great topic. That it would have been cool if we brought that up.
Well, to be continued, Tim, because we had to get back in the flow, right?
All right, we'll get back in the flow. We'll be back next week. I mean, maybe we'll be next week. We don't know what's going to happen. Will Elon Musk buy Twitter? Will the world end?
Talk about that either.
We don't know, but we might talk about it next week.
Well.